Here are two ways you can start off your weekend. You can either spend it in front of your computer, binging content until you don't know what to do anymore, or you can make it last by simply subscribing to this channel. If you subscribe, you get access to over 1,000 videos about all kinds of amazing places, things and moments in time. So whether you're interested in historical events, tales from the past, or everything in between, we have something for everyone. So why not treat yourself to a little bit of nostalgia today? Start your weekend off right and take a break from the same old routine. Click that subscribe button now. It's free, and who knows, maybe you'll discover something new and exciting that will keep you entertained all weekend long. What are you waiting for? Go ahead, click that subscribe button now and see where your weekend takes you. And now back to the video. December had barely ended before people across the country were reaching for their calendars, circling dates for sales and marking birthdays. But for most people, their attention was fixed firmly on the 1st of January. Not because they were looking forward to New Year's Day itself, but because that meant the beginning of a new year, a chance for a fresh start. Across England, Scotland and Wales, people were preparing for another winter of rationing, another year under the watchful eye of the government, another attempt at making do. But there was something about the way this new year began that made people feel hopeful. It started with the weather. As the first snowflakes fell, blanketing the land in white, people looked out their windows with a sense of wonder. The children were especially excited. They donned their warmest coats and hats and ran out into the street, shrieking with delight as they chased each other through drifts of snow. Some families built snowmen, while others had snowball fights. But soon the novelty wore off and people had to return to their daily routines. Life went on as normal. People went to work and the children went to school, although the bus rides were much more fun now that the roads were covered in snow. Evenings were spent indoors, huddled around wireless sets listening to the latest news bulletins or the BBC's home service. Occasionally, a crackling fire provided some warmth and a flickering light against the darkness. Some families were lucky enough to own a television. Though programs were limited and most people were still getting used to the technology, many preferred the radio anyway. It was cheaper, more intimate, and allowed them to use their imaginations. Outside, the wind howled and the rain lashed against the windows, a familiar sound during the winter months. It seemed as if the bad weather would never end. Shops were fully stocked now that Christmas was out of the way, but many people were reluctant to spend money. The war had taught them to be frugal, and they knew that hard times were still to come. Food was still rationed and people had to make do with what they had. Meat was in short supply, so many families turned to fish and chips for dinner. The local butcher might have some nice cuts of meat, but they were expensive and most people couldn't afford them. Farmers' markets were a better bet for cheaper prices and better quality. Those who lived near the coast often supplemented their diet with fish. The sea was full of fish, and it was an excellent source of protein. It was also very filling and kept people warm in the cold weather. For those living further inland, game was a popular alternative to meat. Gamekeepers hunted rabbits, squirrels, foxes, deer, and other wild animals for food. It was hard work, but it was also fun and a welcome distraction from the dreary routine of everyday life. The shops were filled with new merchandise, but the goods were still scarce and people had to wait their turn. The war had disrupted production and distribution networks. It would take years for things to return to normal. But that didn't stop people from trying. They placed orders and waited patiently for their turn to come up. They knew that if they didn't, someone else would buy the item they wanted and they would be left empty-handed. That wasn't an option. They needed the items they ordered. Maybe it was a new coat or a pair of shoes or a dress. Whatever it was essential and should not be wasted. People were doing their best to make ends meet, but many were struggling. Rations were not enough to sustain a family, and people had to find ways to supplement their income. Some took on extra jobs, while others sold items they no longer needed. It was hard work, but it was necessary. People couldn't afford to be idle. They needed to earn money. If they didn't, they would starve. Despite the hardships, people were still finding ways to enjoy themselves. There were dances and parties, and people were making plans for the future. They dreamed of a time when the war would end, and they could finally live their lives. They knew that it would take time, but they were willing to wait. They had endured so much already. A few more years wouldn't make much difference. In the end, the war did end, and people were able to look forward to a brighter future. But that doesn't mean that everyone was happy. Many people had lost loved ones during the conflict, and they would never forget them. They honored the fallen by wearing poppies and attending memorial services. Others found ways to cope with their grief. They talked to friends and family, wrote letters, or simply tried to keep busy. They knew that the best way to honor the dead was to live their lives to the fullest. Looking back, it's easy to see why people in the 1950s felt the way they did. They had been through so much already. They had fought a war and won. They had suffered shortages and rationing, but they had survived. They were strong and resilient, and they knew that they could overcome any challenge. They faced optimism was contagious, and people began to look forward to the future. They were confident that they could create a better world for themselves and their children. They had hope. While this is an entirely fictionalized story based on actual events, if you liked it, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. It helps us grow and reach more people. Also check out my other videos, which are available on this channel. Thanks for watching.